What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Monday, December 16th, 2024 edition of the Daily Energy Newsbeat Stand-Up. Here are today's top headlines. Postal Service plan to electrify mail trucks falling short of its goal. Who would have thunk that? Next up, Biden's DOD doubles down on climate action as Trump promises military reset. Man, we've got... It's very interesting what's going on between the transition team and the current administration right now. Next up, North Korean troops join Russian assaults in, quote, significant numbers in an oil for troops trade. Very interesting there. And then next up, Trump is a nightmare for EU in more ways than one. We'll end with Governor Newsom's EV mandate set to fail as sales lags and power shortages persist. Nothing like ending with good old Oil Slick himself, good friend of the show. Stu will then toss it over to me. I will quickly cover what happened in the oil and gas markets on Friday and talk a little bit about some insurance in some interesting moves in the insurance business that's going on specifically for offshore companies. There's a nice little article from RBC Richardson. We will then let you get out of here and start your week. As always, I'm Michael Tanner, back from vacation. You know, I tell people are asking me where I was last week, and I said, well, I'm in Miami for business. If that's not the biggest oxymoron you've ever heard, I don't know what else is. There was some good business going on. So, Stu, I appreciate you holding down the fort last week. Hopefully we didn't drive off too many of our listeners.
We only got a few trolls.
Only a few trolls. Hey, you's good. I'm going to kick it over to you. Where do you want to begin?
Hey, let's start with my buddy Biden. Holy smokes, Batman. Postal Service plan to electrify mail trucks falling short of its goal. Michael, how short do you think it's fall? I saw this on Jesse Waters' primetime, and I put this in here. $3 billion on 32 mail trucks, $32 million per mail truck. What is going on? This is nuts. The United States Postal Service unveiled a plan to buy a fleet of all-electric trucks for its mail carriers back in 2022, with 3,000 were supposed to be delivered, and they only delivered 32.
I mean, it's insane. We were talking about this right before we jumped on the show. I actually think these look, visually a little bit better than the little stumpy ones. It looks like they're not going to die if they all so much as skid off the road. But, I mean, it's pretty unbelievable. You're talking about 93 vehicles delivered. That almost sounds like the federal funding for plugged and abandoned wells. $10 billion, and they've plugged 9 wells. I mean, that's what it is. Trust me, when the government gets involved with stuff, this type of stuff happens.
Oh, absolutely. The failure, this is the last part in the article here, the failure of these plans doesn't affect just the Postal Service ability to modernize its fleet of aging mail trucks. It could also throw a wrench into President Biden's plan to combat climate change. We got another story on that one.
Yeah, pretty unbelievable. $3 billion on 32 mail trucks. Man, I'd like that contract. Can we get that contract right before Doge comes in?
Well, there's a little bit of a problem, Michael. We do have something called ethics.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Speaking of ethics, let's talk about the DOD.
Holy smokes, Batman. Biden DOD doubles down on climate action as Trump promises military reset. Michael, you can't buy this kind of stupid. Climate change does not constitute a current threat to U.S. national security, but the DOD leaders think otherwise. Quote, in fact, the DOD believes the climate crisis is a national security priority. On December 11th, the DOD announced its concern with climate change in Africa. What? Climate-stressed areas are recruiting areas for terrorist group. What is got to do? That is just unbelievable. Here's another horrible quote. The Department of Defense has identified climate change as a national security issue and threat multiplier, top management challenge, and must take bold steps to accelerate adaptation to reduce adverse impacts of climate change. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Do you remember, Michael, when we talked about them putting solar panels on tanks?
Yeah, I mean, though, that's not going to work. Again, this is not the Department of Defense's job to worry about climate change. Let's just play this out. Even if I was full board climate change, again, remember, climate change, they've done a sleight of hand here. When I was When I was growing up, it was global warming, and they've done a little sleight of hand to say climate change to account for the fact that if it happened to get colder, they'd be covered as well. So a good sleight of hand. But let's just say climate change as sold by the corporate media was correct. Let's assume that. Let's just alternate universe. Let's assume climate change as the corporate media says it is true. It's still not the Department of Defense's job to worry about climate change. It should be the Department of Energy. It should be any one of the other the Department of Interior, any other of these departments that actually deal with the environment, the Bureau of Ocean Management or whatever, not the DOD. And hopefully this is stuff that DOGE is able to come in and clean up. Yes, do we need to just gut the Department of Defense? No. Are they spending a lot more money than they should? Yeah, they probably should. They probably should take a little bit of a budget hit, and we'd probably be just fine from a defense standpoint. So, again, this is classic government, just idiotic, idiocy, thinking that the DOD should be the ones worried about climate change.
Absolutely. Well said, Michael. Outstanding. You should take vacation.
I've got a week off. I've got a lot of pent-up stuff.
Well, speaking of pent off, let's go to North Korea. North Korea troops join Russian assaults in significant numbers. Oil for troops in trade. Michael, I did not have that on my bingo card when I saw that we were going to. How are they paying for this? Kim Jong-un calls up Putin and goes, "Hey, I got bodies. You want bodies?" And Putin goes, "I got oil. You want oil?" This is hilarious. Today, we begin the preliminary data that Russians have begun to use North Korean soldiers in their assaults. You and I are laughing about this right now, but it does not underpin the importance of low-cost energy from Russia, as Chancellor Scholz has had several calls asking for more natural gas. And I guarantee you, he is prompting to end the war in Ukraine so he can buy Russian natural gas. I thought that was very important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little crazy. I'm all about getting people oil, but if you got to trade literal just bodies that are eventually, because these North Korean troops are going straight to the front line. They're basically just going. They're going to end up just being killed because of the way things are going on. It's pretty brutal. Unbelievable.
It is brutal, and it breaks my heart that let's just end all wars. All right, let's go to the next one. Speaking of Trump is a nightmare for the EU in more of the ways than one. This actually came in, and I thought it's from RT, which is the Russian.
Your favorite news source, Russia Times?
Oh, yeah, Russia Times, baby. But it was interesting. I don't agree with everything in it, but it has some great points. Well, first, there's Russia. Regarding Moscow, Trump seems ready to talk in a substantial manner, which we've not seen since the Cold War. Trump is realizing he would rather do business with Russia than rather try to have a Cold War. I applaud Trump's methodology there, but he's also put out that challenge to Russia and saying, wait a minute, BRICS, hold off on trying to have another thing. So I actually like what President Trump is doing.
Shocker, you like what Trump's doing. I do think it is. I would have never guessed. Trump is a nightmare for the EU in the standpoint of, I think what he does is he does what Elon Musk does, and he's got Elon Musk in his ear. They think from first principles. He was back in 2017 when he was talking about, hey guys, you're addicted to Russian gas. That may cause a conflict at some point. He was thinking from first principles. Hey, if you do see Russia as this threat, if you do see Russia as somebody who's going to be aggressive, maybe think about getting your gas from alternative sources, thinking from first principles. That's what I think he's going to do here. I think that's what he's doing specifically with going to be reversing a lot of the green energy policies here. Specifically, I think there's, the LNG export ban. That alone is going to be a huge boon for the EU, and it would play them and it would do them well to understand that if we at home can get LNG export facilities approved, all that gas is going overseas. Why? Because there's a huge arbitrage of pricing. We've got enough natural gas here. We've got so much natural gas here. There are companies in specifically the Delaware Basin, so we're talking about the Permian Basin, but on the New Mexico side, who can't produce their wells because there's not enough capacity in the pipelines to put the natural gas, and you can't flare because it's on federal land. So what do you have to do? shut the well in. We've got
Right.
so much natural gas that it would behoove them to do it. Yet what I fear is going to happen is exactly what this article talks about, is there's going to end up being a butting of heads, because
Yes.
Europe's got to show that they're, smart, they're wiser. It's like, guys, understand what we're trying to do here.
And it's the Germany green energy policies. As Germany's economy goes, so does the EU. Well, they've killed the great Germany manufacturing machine through their green policies. And now Chancellor Scholz is begging for Russian oil again. I mean,
I got to say it. He sees nothing.
I see nothing. I see nothing. We got to do that on a meme, man. That would be a great meme. I see no Russian gas. In fact,
we got to put that on a mug. All right, let's talk about friend of the show, Gavin Newsom.
Oh my gosh. Hey, just in, this is the Bay Patrol. Bay Patrol is calling. Wait a minute. Oil slick. He's taking a bath in the bay. Holy crap. The only man that could have a bigger oil slick than the Exxon Valdez, Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom taking EV mandate sets to fail as sales lag. Power shortages persist. We ran a story last week, Michael. The number one reason people don't want to buy an EV is because of the lack of grid infrastructure to charge it, the cost to do it. And here it is right here. Governor Newsom's electric vehicle mandate is set to fail as sales of EVs in his bleak blue state lag far behind the level necessary to reach 100% of the vehicle marketplace. Unbelievable. This guy is a knucklehead. Headwinds are fueling fresh doubts as Governor Newsom's mandate for all new cars by California 2035 be zero emission. This is unbelievable. This came out of Breitbart.
Yeah, I mean, again, we were telling you this if you were listening to the show four years ago when we were back at the old regime under a new. I mean, we were talking about this then, and it's just, and now people are just waking up. You call us Nostradamus. I'm serious, but if there's no way this is going to happen. Now, your friend Elon Musk, Stu, he actually would disagree with our argument. He thinks that everything is going to be electric much sooner. I don't know if you saw some of his tweets going on this week. So it'll be very interesting, again.
And I put that out there, Michael, that Elon will be the surviving EV by rights because of your comments are dead on, Michael. And you have said his technology and people are buying Teslas for a reason. Don't mandate them. Make them good.
Government always chooses incorrectly. Always.
There's a coffee mug. We got coffee mugs galore today.
I know. If only we had a merch site. We don't, but maybe we need to create one.
I think we ought to.
We ought to create one. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and jump over to finance, guys. But before we do that, we've got to pay the bills. Thank you, as always, for checking us out on the world's greatest website, energynewsbeat.com. All the news and quote-unquote analysis you've just heard is brought to you by said website. Stu and the team do a tremendous job making sure that website stays up to speed. Everything you need to know to be at the tip of the spear when it comes to the energy and the oil and gas business. Go ahead and hit that description below for all the links to the timestamps, links to the articles, and also subscribe to our Substack, theenergynewsbeat.substack.com. We appreciate all of our premium subscribers over there. That's a great way to support the show. If you like the content we are putting out, go ahead and subscribe to our Substack. You can also check out, like I said, timestamps, links to the articles. We're coming up towards the end of the year, guys. 15 days left, or as you're listening to this, 14 days left. If you guys have a tax problem, I promise you we have a way to help solve your tax problem. It's a direct investment in oil and gas. Become Billy Bob Thornton from Landman. You can tell everybody at the holiday. How cool would it be to be at your holiday Christmas party and you could just start going off like Billy Bob Thornton? It gives you, and really what you could be going off about is how you've paid very little in taxes because you were able to reduce your taxable income because you invested directly in oil and gas. Go to investinoil.energynewsbeat.com if you want to learn more. We will get you all the information and connected with the right people. That's investinoil.energynewsbeat.com. All right, let's look at just the markets, Stu. Markets had a great last week. We ended up really ripping. We were S&P 500 and NASDAQ both touched all-time highs. On Friday, they were basically flat for the S&P 500. NASDAQ was actually up 0.7 of a percentage point. 2- and 10-year yields spiked tremendously. 10-year yield outperformed at 1.69. 2-year yield was 1.24 percentage points. Bitcoin up above 100,000 per coin. Holy smokes, $103,000 over this weekend. Crude oil was up 1.8 percentage points on Friday. That's 71.29. Brent oil was only up a half a percentage point, 74.52. NASDAQ was actually up 5%, natural gas was down 5 percentage points, $3.28 after spiking above $3.55 earlier on December 12th. And then we did see our XOP contract shed about 0.8 of a percentage point, 135.96, which is, pretty interesting, Stu, considering you've got oil prices up, oil companies down. I don't know what that shows. And again, not to harp on, it shows you why investing directly in oil and gas is better than buying stocks, because stocks aren't necessarily correlated to the price of oil. If you want oil price exposure, invest directly. All right, I'm off my soapbox. Let's move back to oil, guys. Up, like I said, about 2%, really at a 3-week high. What looking like is going to happen is we're going to have some massive, massive sanctions on Iran. This is analysts at Ritterberg and Associates. The strength is being driven by expectations of tighter sanctions against Russia and Iran, more support of Chinese economic guidance, Mideast political havoc, and prospects for a Fed rate cut next week. We are listening and watching out to that. I do think it is critical to talk about what's going on in Syria right now, Stu. I only listened to your Tuesday show, and you mentioned Syria a little bit, but give us an update from your end. What's going on there, and what's the impact specifically you're going to see on energy, you think?
Well, I had a nice, great 2-hour conversation with George McMillan yesterday
Yes.
about Syria, and it is unbelievable. The deep state is alive and well, and the amount of cash that U.S. dollar bills has been found shrink wrap from the New York Fed, and it just is criminal that there's that much cash from the U.S. The U.S. does not need to be destroying governments, and the Syrian government is a pathway for pipelines, and that's what this is all about, believe it or not. If Assad had actually allowed the pipelines to go through, he'd still be in power.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It's about pipelines, baby.
It is about pipelines. An interesting note here, the IEA, our friends over there, the International Energy Administration, they actually increased on Thursday their 2025 global oil demand growth to 1.1 million barrels per day, up from 990,000 barrels per day last month. And they specifically cited some stuff they're seeing in China, specifically the stimulus stuff. New bank lending in China actually rose by far less than expected, which is actually, prompted some of these more stimulus measures. Now, what they are saying is that on the same token forecasting an oil surplus for next year, specifically citing the fact that Argentina, Brazil, Canada, Guyana, and the U.S. are expected to boost supply somewhere around 1.5 million barrels per day. And again, these are a lot of non-OPEC plus nations. The UAE, which is the second largest, or I would say the third largest OPEC plus member, if we're talking about OPEC plus, plans to reduce oil shipments early next year as they are attempting to seek quote unquote tighter discipline. It's going to be very interesting to see what comes around here, specifically with rate cuts next week. We know Trump would love that. It'll be very interesting to see where prices go relative to what's going to happen. I think these next 6 months, as I say this often, are going to be fairly frothy. I think the fact that we've held steady above 71 tells you that, or $70 tells you there is some strength there. I have heard the other side of the coin. Trisha Curtis, she's a great analyst over at Petro Nerd, CEO over there. I was reading some of her stuff, and she was actually taking the opposite. She was saying that considering the political chaos going on in the Middle East, considering the craziness that's going on with Iran, Syria, the craziness that's going on in Europe, the Ukraine war, she says that oil should be $10 higher under normal circumstances. But the fact that we have so much supply on the market, that's why we're seeing $70 oil. So interesting case. It's whatever you want to believe on one side or the other. Last article I have, Texas oil company asks federal court to stop insurance companies' $250 million demand for additional collateral. This is really interesting, guys. Okay, so Houston-based offshore is asking a federal judge to declare insurers have, quote, colluded to damage the company by jointly demanding additional collateral and premiums, okay? So at the heart of this dispute, what's going on is, as we mentioned, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, known as the OEM, requires energy producers, specifically in the Gulf of Mexico, but specifically on the outer continental shelf, to provide a bond, which is basically a, hey, here's an upfront money that just is going to sit in a escrow account to pay for well platform pipeline and facilities cleanup if the operating company fails to do. It's very similar to an onshore bond. If you're an oil and gas operator, you're very familiar with that. The state of Texas, specifically, if you have X number of wells, will require you put up a certain amount of money in an event that you are unable to actually remediate your well sites, aka plug them, make the land look good. But on offshore, the rules are a lot different. It's a lot more costly to do that. And basically what they're saying in their legal firing says that its insurers, also known as the surety providers, which include Endurance Assurance Corp., which is owned by a Japanese insurance holding company, and others, begin demanding additional collateral and indemnity agreements that WTI already utilizes, for which it has already paid premiums. To give you some background here, we're going to do straight from the article. In July, one of these companies demanded W&T fully and immediately collateralize their bond by paying an additional $89 million as collateral, then filed suit in November demanding $93.5 million, despite never having missed a previous payment. Other surety companies followed suit demanding full and immediate collateralization of their bonds. Here's a quote from CEO Tracy W. Crone. These insurance companies and their unreasonable demands for increased collateral pose an existential threat to independent operators like W&T. We cannot afford to keep paying for insurance we've already paid for in the course of our operations. This is no different than your auto insurance carrier, and I love when people put it in non-oil and gas terms because everybody can understand it. This is no different than your auto insurance carrier all of a sudden demanding you put 100% of your car's cash value in addition to doubling or tripling your existing premium. It is not just possible or practical. These unfair begs one question. If insurance companies are requiring full cash collateralization of these bonds they issue, then what is the purpose of independent paying millions of dollars to issue these bonds? It's a great, great question. Now, I do think what's happening is that there's a push to, in Texas, one of the big things, I was at a conference 2 months ago talking about specifically orphan and abandoned wells. It's a big issue. It's, obviously we don't want abandoned wells onshore. We really don't want them offshore. They pose a significant threat. So I think there's, I do think specifically having robust bonding for offshore oil companies' demand, but this seems like a little bit of a stretch. And especially when you're dealing with these type of government regulations, these insurance companies feel like the government's going to back them up. And if they can bully these companies into paying a little bit more insurance, maybe they can. So talk to me a little bit about you. You've been in kind of the orphan well business. What are you hearing about some of this stuff? Because this, if true, this is scary.
It is. There's when you take a look at Sarah Stonger out there trying to do the orphan well thing out there, she is absolutely on fire because of orphan wells are a problem. Now they are getting better, as we know. RT from Pecos Operating is charged for every operating well for that he is in, and any of the new folks. But the older leases, if they're 100 years old, you got some orphan well problems.
I could talk about this for a while. I was having a conversation about it, but point is, you're right. In my opinion, we have to figure out a way for the free market to solve this. But if the free market is going to use the government, is going to basically be bullies and feel like the government is going to back them up in being a bully, then you've got a misalignment of a sentence. But very interesting, guys. Watch out for your insurance companies. That's all I've got, Stu. What should people be worried about this week?
Well, I've got more stuff coming out on the Syria and geopolitical stuff going on around the world, because the more money that is invested in renewable energy, the more fossil fuels will be pumped and sold. So Turley's law, and we've got some more things coming around the corner. I still think that it is going to be around that 80 to 85 instead of the 70. And I agree with Trisha is that it is being held down for some reason.
Yeah, and she would say it's due to the fact that we are an oversupplied. I don't know where I fall on that, but we will let you.
All the charts are saying that we are down at the 5-year low. I disagree.
Gasoline stocks, though. Talking about gasoline, not crude oil.
I'm talking all of our other charts I've been looking at and been following.
The charts. All right, guys. Well, with that, we will let you get out of here, get back to work, start your week. We appreciate Appreciating you starting your week with Energy Newsbeat. For Stuart, Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.